Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Good evening, shalom. Welcome to another episode of the Big Daddy Liberty Show. It's 7:30 on a Wednesday evening, which means this beautiful Zulu mug is going to be on your screens for the next 25 minutes to 30 minutes or so. Welcome to it. I am, let's call it on the road at the moment, traveling. I'm on the road. I'm in Cape Town at the moment, and we'll be here for at least the next 2 weeks as we begin to film quite a few things, really, that are of a human interest for me. And I want to view them, of course, through the lens of liberty. And one of the things that, I think I wanted to open up with, if you will, an opening salvo is on the issue of poverty. But before I get into any of that, before I really get into any of that, a reminder to you, please hit that like button and by all means, share the stream, whether you're watching it on YouTube, Facebook, or on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter. Twitter. Good evening, welcome to it. As always, this is a very short episode. BDL shows are never more than 30 minutes. Can I just get a quick feedback from the admins, please? Not everybody, the admins. Can you guys hear me clearly? If you guys can hear me clearly, then I think we'll kick off what will be should I call it a rant or a conversation with myself, if anything. So the English word for that would be a monologue. Um, because the drive from Durban to Cape Town is a very interesting one for me. I took the N3 and N5 route, and then of course the N1 down. Thank you, Lynn, for confirming that you guys can hear me clearly. And as I was finishing off my thought there, and the N1 down to Cape Town. It's a very long drive, and it's one which will take you through really South Africa's forgotten rust belt, if I can call it that, if I can appropriate that expression. Along that route, through KZN, Free State, the Northern Cape, and of course the Western Cape, you'll see Uh, okay. I think we're back. Yeah, I'm hoping we're not going to have this kind of evening of a bad network because I do want to actually really unpack some of these issues. And maybe on that note, let me then keep this episode shorter than what it usually is. Because uh, there's quite a few observations I've made along the way, and as I was saying, that trip from Durban to Cape Town via the N3, N5, was the N8? I'm not sure which it is. N5, and of course N1 sends you through some of the most forgotten parts of South Africa. You know, I'm talking about towns like Senekal, for example, and it was actually quite emotional to drive through that town again, considering what had me there in the first place, right? Um, Excuse me, pardon me. Kombucha came back. Um, Let me just remove that from the screen. You know, towns like Senekal, Bloemfontein, which is looking like an absolute dump, is a town along the way, of course. And then you begin to hit the N1 through the Northern Cape until you get into the Western Cape. You know, towns like Colesberg and the like. Needless to say, it is a vivid and stark reminder, blatant reminder for those of us who live in urban centers, your Johannesburg, Cape Towns, Durbans, who maybe, who maybe like to forget or shut out the reality of what it is to be a South African, and how for the majority of South Africans, and let me add a number to this, 55.5% of fellow South Africans live below what we consider to be the poverty line. That is basically just under, is it 930 Rand per month to live with? That's 55.5, near on 60%, pardon me, nearly 56% rather. Let me get rid of my Jacob Zuma math there, but nearly 56% of South Africans live below that bread and the poverty line, which then has me asking the question, why is it very convenient, or why is it preferable for the elites, the political elites in this country, the corporate media, the chattering classes, the hoofdy academic types? Why is it so convenient, or necessary rather is the word, for them to not have this conversation? These people have been in power collectively, directly and indirectly. They've been in power in this country since the dawn of democracy. They've had near on 30 years to make a serious dent into the abject poverty levels, which are, yes, on the one hand, have a historical background, right? Let's not take that away. Let's not take away that, our history of apartheid and colonialism, of course, had a massive influence in the state of things. But these people have had 30 years of their ideas, 30 years of listening to their crap, where they told us, oh no, they'll said, they'll fix things. All they need is more power, more resources, more taxes, more regulation, more race-based legislation, they told us, in order to fix things. It's been 30 years of this crap. And yet you have a situation where today, the overwhelming majority of people who remain poor and desperate and miserable are Black South Africans. The very people who they claim they trade for, the very people who they claim they stand and represent. Someone square that circle for me. How is it possible politically that the people who you claim to represent, often even when you listen to the language of politicians, they'll say, we represent these people because they are at risk of those other people. And in this country, those other people, the people who we other, are invariably white South Africans. Oh, but these politicians are slick, though. They're clever. So they never will outwardly say white South Africans because they recognize that's blatantly racist. So what do lefties do? They do what they do best, which is they manipulate language and they make up words. So they'll say, oh no, we're not against white people. We're against whiteness or white monopoly capital. But in any event, those same people who say they're against whiteness or white monopoly capital in representing Black South Africans, why the fudge do they not explain why those same Black South Africans they represent still represent the overwhelming majority of poor people in this country? And I mean poverty-stricken people in this country. Again, let me hit you with more numbers. Of those same poverty-stricken South Africans, I hope I'm not off screen here, of those same poverty-stricken South Africans, I said 55.5% of them live below the poverty line. 1 in 4 of those South Africans actually are food insecure, do not know where their next meal is coming from. That is the real South Africa outside primarily of the urban centers. And that's not to say that urban centers don't have poor people. Of course they do. But by and large, those same urban centers have a very insulated and protected and sheltered elite, primarily a political elite, with their chorus in the mainstream media, the corporate media in particular. We've become a society that rewards and indeed celebrates state dependency, poor people becoming dependents of the state. We celebrate that. The ANC year on year, whether it's in the president's State of the Nation address or the finance minister's budget speech, we'll try and get the loudest clap about how X amount of social grants are being paid now, which is an increase from the previous year. I believe that number is now north of 17 million South Africans who are dependent on the state. And who are they really dependent on in real terms? Because the state doesn't have money. Let's divorce ourselves from this myth that government has money. Government doesn't have a flipping cent. All money that these politicians bandy about comes from you, the taxpayer. Whether it's a direct tax, such as personal income taxes, or effectively an indirect one, which you pay via VAT. That's value-added tax, a sales tax, essentially. All South Africans pay tax, but those who are most dependent on the state are dependent on those South Africans who pay the direct taxes, such as rates and levies at a municipal level, or at a national level, personal income taxes, and corporate taxes to an extent. And what are those numbers? What do those numbers look like? Well, I just said there's 17 point something million who are dependent on social grants of one iteration or the other. And again, I'm not blaming the people who are dependent on social grants. Hear me right here, people. I'm not blaming the people who are dependent on social grants. They are not to blame here. The people who are to blame are the political elites, those who are in government and in governance, and whose ideas are pervasive in our society, whose ideas run and control all the levels of society, whether economic, social, or political. They're the ones who are perpetuating a situation where, as I said, we're creating a society of the insulated, the insiders, if you will, the economic insiders, and the economically forgotten in this country, the Rust Belt, where people eke out an existence outside of the urban centers, outside of the areas with private security, trendy security guards, trendy coffee shops rather, and the laptop elite who sit and think they're being productive on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, I'm coming for a few scalps today. And if I'm attacking you, tough titty. Because it's worth having this conversation insofar as just in a drive from Durban to Cape Town, you see who I'm talking about when I say the forgotten in this country. They are poor, with very little prospects, if not no prospects, and mostly they're Black. And I raised that last issue, the racial one, not because I necessarily want to hop on about race. You all know me enough to know that this channel is non-racial in its approach. But I raised the issue of race on purpose insofar as to underscore the failure of the very people who claim to represent certain races. The failure of those people who sit in government, who sit in positions of power, their failure to represent the so-called people who they claim to represent. So that the issue becomes, there is something fundamentally wrong in the manner in which we're doing things as South Africans, where even as the rest of us, the productive, the innovative, the enterprising, the hardworking, even as that South African, invariably the ordinary South African, the faith, flag, family, and freedom type South African, even as that South African is saying, hey man, I'm sinking here. My quality of life, I'm watching it crumble around me. And I see it in an everyday way as the ordinary South African. When I go to a grocery store where I was spending, maybe for a family of 4, where I was spending 6 months ago, 2,500, maybe 2,800, maybe even 3 on groceries for the month, I'm now spending much more. And it's money I don't have. When I was spending, let's call it 4,000 Rand a month on petrol or diesel for my vehicle, I'm now spending 6, near on 7 for some people. 1,000 Rand, that is, per month. Where do you think this money comes from? Who do you think is coming to save you? Who are these brilliant individuals? Or who is this Messiah we're waiting for, who is going to come and save and change all of this? I'm just asking questions tonight, because at some stage, all of the questions I will pepper you with here, I'm going to introduce a succession of voices, experts, if you will, who will help us unpack them in detail. Whether they're economists, whatever the case may be, the show is going to get very, very deep and insightful over the next few months. And I might even start giving you a daily offering, a very short daily offering. Yes, I know what you guys are saying. Short, Big Daddy, whatever. No, I will. I will give you a short daily offering. Well, on the one hand, okay, let me not get into that. Let me finish my thought process here. Because I'm just mindful of time. And I see your comments, guys. I see your comments. Keep the conversation going, because there's a few things. As I said, this show was born out of the observations I made on that drive from Durban to Cape Town, where you pass through the Rust Belt, if I can call it that, of South Africa, the forgotten dorpies, the small towns in this country, which used to pretty much make up a sizable lifeblood of what our economy is, to an extent. But today, you can almost expect to see tumbleweeds rolling through them, as those people become the forgotten. And the major impetus of tonight's episode is my frustration and almost disgust, really, at how the elites in this country, the political elites, the politicians, the corporate media, the chattering classes, and of course, the never-ending list of woke academia in this country, who demand that you ignore those people, you ignore the reality of where we are financially, economically, and otherwise, and you focus on bloody racism. Focus on racism, they'll tell you. Focus on how Black South Africans are continuously victims of white South Africans. That's what they're telling us to focus on. That white South Africans have it out to get us. Careful, they'll say. That white South African is just ready to do something to you. That's the biggest threat we're told that we're facing as South Africans, Black or whatever. I hate that expression, people of color. I hate that expression. Why is that? Why are we being dribbled and distracted? Why is it that those who govern us, who hold the most power in society, who make the most decisions, who control nearly all aspects of our lives, why is it they are so keen on having someone else to be the scapegoat for our ills in society, when it's them and they who actually hold the power, who make the decisions? Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I don't understand something. Maybe if I walk out through those doors now, there's a group of white guys waiting to come and pee on my stuff because I'm black. Or maybe when I'm done on the studio, I can accuse, I'm gonna be cheeky here. Maybe I can accuse Nas Buerta and Nick Mallet of being racist simply because they played in the apartheid era. Maybe I can accuse the CEO of Cricket South Africa of being a rabid racist and drag him through a disciplinary hearing. Maybe I can, I don't know, find someone, anybody, as long as they're white, to blame it on South Africa's ills. That seems to be how things work these days. That seems to be the modus operandi of how those who hold the most power, who make the most decisions, seek to scapegoat those who hold the least political power in this country, to scapegoat those who haven't likely, or rather, not likely, but haven't actually held significant political power over the last 30 years. It's those people who we're told we need to blame. I repeat, there is something fundamentally wrong in the society that does something like that. That even as fellow South Africans suffer, no one wants to take accountability amongst those who actually hold power, and instead they tell you to focus on them, that evil other. And by the way, white South Africans are on the receiving end for now. But a point will come where those very same people, the elites broadly, who I described earlier, I used to call them the establishment, hashtag the establishment, corporate media, political elites, politicians, woke academia, chattering classes, the establishment. The day will come where they'll realize the race grift around blaming whites is over. Or, excuse me, white monopoly capital and whiteness. They'll realize that grift is not working anymore. And trust you me, the next minority will be up on the firing line. Whether it's Indian South Africans or it's colored South Africans, they won't care. And once they're done there with that minority group, they'll move to the next minority, where they'll begin to segment it in some way. You had one President Zuma once described his detractors, those who may happen to be within the black middle class. He called them clever blacks, he said. Why? Because they called out his nonsense. And more of those clever blacks, or coons, or Uncle Toms, or house niggers, all these things that people like me get called, that'll be the next minority who gets singled out. Singled out by the very people who ironically hold the power and make the decisions. That's your South Africa today. Or at least that's the South Africa which, clearly, if there is a divide in this country, it's a divide between ordinary South Africans, the faith, flag, family, and freedom type South Africa, people like you and me, versus the elite, the establishment, who are hell-bent on preserving narratives that don't match up with reality and shaming you for calling out the fugazi, the fakeness of it all. You're a racist, they'll say. You're a bigot. You just don't believe in the revolution. You're a counter-revolutionary. But when you ask them, where is this revolution headed? And let me be specific. The ANC, quite literally, in their founding documents, since the 50s at least, when the commies came on board, the ANC believed in this notion that South Africa must go through what they call a national democratic revolution. Communist, socialist bullshit. And I'm asking the question, as those ideas, as those leftist ideas which have governed this country broadly for the last 30 years, as they're crumbling around us, and the effects of their poor policies, their poor ideas, and their poor governance, the effects of which we're beginning to see creating a society of the forgotten and the sheltered few, why is it that when we then call that out, we become the bad people, the racists, they'll say, the counter-revolutionaries? We are being dribbled and distracted by people who do not care about us, but who insist we fight each other. How else can we explain worsening numbers in this country? Whether it's the unemployment rate, which has broken records, 35.3% of fellow South Africans jobless, and for a lot of them, probably unemployable. And that's, by the way, the conservative figure. The expanded definition of unemployment, much higher number. Ordinary South Africans, the people who I love, the faith, flag, family, and freedom types, they face those headwinds of poverty, unemployment, and inflation. The very money, what little money they have even in their pockets, the value of which is eroding in front of them. Inflation in this country, 5.9%. That's the official figure, of course. But in real terms, for those of us who live in the real world, we know it's much higher. The price of goods in this country is climbing higher rather than the supposed 5.9% we're being told that it is. So you and I are clearly living the reality. It's the establishment in this country who aren't. They aren't, and not only are they not living that reality, they're telling us to ignore what our eyes see, to ignore what our ears hear, to disregard what we palpably feel is the erosion of our quality of life around us. An establishment who control the media in this country and are thus the loudest voice in the room. An establishment who control policy in this country. They make up the political elites and politicians in this country. An establishment who continue to double down on their bad policy ideas, their bad ideologies effectively. Why? Because they make up the broad strokes of who our academia is, excuse me. The very same academia that feeds in the toxic narratives, the toxic ideologies into the echelons of power. Don't fool yourself if you think you're the one who controls things simply because you vote a certain way. You don't control jack. It's the establishment who run things here. And that is the divide I'm arguing really exists in this country. It's not a divide between the races. It's not a black versus white thing. It is us, the ordinary citizens, the faith, flag, family, and freedom types of African versus the establishment, made up of politicians, political elites, the corporate media, the chattering classes, and of course, the work academia. And until we wake up to this, until we start observing around us and talking more, not just Big Daddy Liberty, but all of us start voicing our actual displeasure at things, and beyond that, more importantly, rallying each other to take action. Until we have, as I said, that unity of purpose, we organize each other, and then we mobilize to act, nothing will change. But hey, maybe as the establishment says, rather focus on racism. That's my thought for tonight, people. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Sorry that this episode was not as jam-packed with guests as usual. I really just wanted to talk to you directly. Let me know what you think. What has been the effects on your life and livelihoods of this decline of our once great country? What are the effects on you? Maybe you're seeing them on your everyday pocket. Because I can tell you now, the poverty that's growing in this country will be the great equalizer, as lefties want, Because they don't care about your race, they don't care about your culture. When that poverty strikes, rather, nothing will matter other than where will my next meal come from? Where will I get that money to pay for the mortgage or the car note or my children's school fees? Maybe that's just my house. Guys, thanks for watching. Hit that like button, please, on your way out, and leave a comment. Leave a comment. I'll be checking the comments out whether on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. Let me know what you guys think. And beyond that, we're going to have these conversations going forward. So look out for this episode of Liberty and Friends on Sunday at 8 p.m. because I'll bring a heavyweight panel of guys who can help us unpack these issues as I sort of tease them out tonight. With that being said, thanks for watching, as I said. And a reminder, as I always say at the end of every episode, never trust a commie.